Usually when you get a second chance to make something, you try to improve upon the prior edition if you're a company, especially when it comes to electronics. So today I want to take a special look at the Nintendo Entertainment System because I'm going to modify the Nintendo Entertainment System 101, or NES 101 as it's known. And this is the second edition in North America for a Nintendo. Originally our Nintendos looked like this, and this did have some very great features but also had some big drawbacks. For example, the cart connector would often wear out and you'd lose contact with a lot of your games and they would have the red blinking light. There's also a lockout chip in this version that causes problems with games. And then you've also got the larger design of the actual console too. So Nintendo did improve upon some of those features with this secondary console, and that was of course the size. It's a lot smaller, it's more durable, and you've got a better, much better pin connector here that you just slip the cartridge in and it works every time. However, they did not do everything better. They actually made the video quality worse on these. Well, let's not say worse, we'll say the same. They only give you RF out, not even composite or mono audio like they did in the original version. So today we're going to do more. We're going to do what Nintendo didn't. We're going to add composite, and we're going to add S-video, and most importantly, RGB. So sit back and let's get started. Okay, so again, here's our console, the NES 101. Just a closer look at it. And to get started on this project, we're going to need a security bit so we can open up this console. And I've got that right here. Now, these are pretty standard. You can find these on eBay and many different shops, but you will need this to open up this console. So just to get started, we're going to flip it over on its back and then undo these screws. Now that we've gotten the screws out, it's simply the top just comes right off. And then for the rest of the screws inside here, we will have to remove them so we can get this motherboard out. They're all Phillips head from now on, so you don't need that security bit anymore. Now that all those screws have been removed, it simply comes right out. I can leave that bottom tray in there for now. Set that aside and take our top shielding off. And here is our Nintendo motherboard, and we can get to work on it. Next step here is to desolder some things like this chip right here, and then I'm also going to desolder a lot of stuff on this end so I can get it out of the way and change some of those parts out. So I'm going to reflow solder down here on a lot of these points so I can pull off this input, because we're going to change that, as well as the power. And then maybe even some of these components back here will change. We'll go ahead and flow some fresh solder on there, and we'll flow it down here on this chip, and then we'll use the desoldering tool to pull it out. So right now, let's just go ahead and get started with flowing some fresh solder on here. Now I've got the top area, all this has had fresh solder reflowed on it. Now it's time to reflow the solder on this chip. You always want to reflow solder when you're using this desoldering tool. It just makes this process a whole lot easier, and you really limit the possibilities of damaging your board because the solder just seems to pull right out when it's nice and fresh. So let's get started. Lay down. Alright, this part of the job is going to require my Hacko FR301. Now it is nice and hot. To desolder this job today, I'm going to have my setting on about 2.5. And then it's super loud, the vacuum is. Here. So I'm going to try to edit out some of that sound. We'll just go through it now and desolder these parts off the main board. So I'm just going to go through here now and make sure that my pins are clear and that I can pull my chip now. Alright, so here we have it. I've desoldered everything that needs to come off this board. Let's take a look here. Here is our PPU slot that's cleaned out now and got everything cleared out so we can install our RGB mod. And then on the back here, I've gotten rid of the RF unit, and then I had to take out the power plug right here, and then also there's that 7805 that goes right there, and I'll put that back, all three of these back. Well, not this RF, because this is where our multi-out will be sitting, is in this spot. Now the first part to be reinstalled, or new part to be installed, will be this power input, the AC plug. So it just goes into that other spot. Now I'm going to put some solder on it as well as some flux. Our next portion of this install is going to be for this special piece. Now this is a special order piece I got from Retrofixes. It's pretty much a 3D printed back for this, and it will slip around there, the AC plug, and fits in the same spot as the original did, but it gives me a nice spot on top there so I can put in my cables, and then I can use the same multi-out and the same SCART or any type of cable I want that fits the Super Nintendo pinout. So now I'm simply going to do is there's 12 connectors in there, so I'm going to populate every one of those connectors with a cable so I can have every bit of capabilities out of this mod. I'll have it be able to do composite, S-video, RGB. And so for the mod I'm using ribbon wire, and I've already pre-tinned it and pre-cut it, and this is 10 cord, and then I've got an extra 2 cord here since it's 12 spots. And to get started, I'm just going to fill in the spots with my cables, all 12 of them, and solder them into place on this, and then I'll use my pinout here, and this comes from the manufacturer of this, so I'll use this pinout and I'll connect this to the RGB card when we work on it for the rest of the mod. But first I'm just going to go ahead and solder those cables right into this connector. Just get that cleaned up, but those are my 12 wires that'll go straight over to my RGB mod. Let's take a look now at the RGB kit before we start installing it into the main board. Here's a look at our install kit or RGB kit, and you can see it's already been pretty much put together. I did this ahead of time. This is the PPU right here that came out of the Nintendo originally, and you can see that it's been installed in a socket here, This board is the same as the other NES board. However, if you look around the bottom, in order to fit this in this console, there has to be this kind of bridge built so you can put this into a socket. But this is very easy to do. There's really good instructions linked below. Here's our NES motherboard, and I've inserted this chip socket, and this is where the RGB mod will pin into. But it's not been soldered in there. I just slipped it into the emptied solder points, and so after I get that situated, I'm going to go through here now and just put fresh solder and flux on here to connect this. Pencil flux, we'll start to solder these connections. Now I'm going to install the kit in the Nintendo and then wire it up to our multi-out. So I've got my sheet here that tells me what color each cable of mine is actually connected to on the multi-out, and I'm test fitting it here. I've got my board sitting in the motherboard. So now I'm just going to simply go in here and solder these points on to the board, and we'll go from there. Alright, so here we have it. Now, it does look a little bit messy because I haven't cleaned up the flux off there yet, and I might touch up the solder points, but you can see how dizzying it was. I just had to scramble these cables over here so they could match my pinout. And the last thing I need to do is install my heat shielding with my 7805 in there, and that'll go down right over top there and soldered back into place right nicely in the back. Alright, so let's do one last look over here, because after some research I did realize that you do need to hook up your audio cable, and you come directly off the CPU here. So on the top part of that CPU, the very first and second pins on there, you bridge those over to this where there's an A and a B right next to the output for audio on this board. So that pin 1 goes to A, pin 2 goes to B. And that way we'll be able to get an audio signal out to our multi-out now. Okay, so I just fired this thing up and our screen looks great. Our volume's working. So this mod is completely done and good looking. So let's just run through some tests and see, make sure we don't get any crazy sprites or anything, artifacts showing up. No, it seems to be running well. And yep, it's perfect. The screen quality is amazing. Wow. Alright. Let's take one more closer look here before I close this up for good. Again, we installed this nice multi-out, and we've got a new 7805 IC in there, and we've got this new power input that had to go with our new multi-out. Now this is good because then if we wanted to undo this mod for any other reason, or for any reason, it can be undone and nothing's been damaged. Our cables will fit nicely under there and around the side here. Please note that you cannot add the shielding back after this, so bottom or top, it's not really a good idea. It's going to crump it down too much. So that's just one thing to take a look at there. Now I'm going to put it back together another thing to note is sometimes that board can get pushed out because there's kind of a gap up here and it's only connected down at this point. So just make sure it stays flat along here and all your pins are still connected before you close it. That way you won't have to open it up again. But let's close it now and we'll get another quick test. Here we are with the top on. Looks great. Now let's go ahead and take this on over and start doing some tests. Right, so this is RGB and we can see it works great. And we've got our sound and everything. So I'm going to go in here and start the game and then we'll switch over to some of the other inputs and see how it works. Again, RGB is working good. Let's switch over to S-Video. Here we have NTSC, that's S-Video. Looks good and sharp. And now let's go ahead and try composite while we're at it, just to make sure these work. And there you have it, that's composite. So all three outputs are working great right now. Let's get the console out and we'll talk about some final things. Alright everybody, let's take a quick minute and talk about in detail at the end here what I think about this mod. Now I've got to be honest with you, this mod is a little bit more difficult. It does take a little bit more time and you definitely have to have the right tools for it, because it's very easy to damage the main motherboard on this Nintendo, and then you're going to be stuck probably having to correct traces and other things. So you have to be very careful and make sure that you don't try to pull the chips too fast without getting rid of all the solder, and also make sure you clean and retouch up everything correctly. This mod, I feel like there's still a couple issues. One of the main reasons I've been doing a tutorial on this mod is I just don't like the actual guides that are made on the internet for this mod. It's a great mod, but it's just not as clear as it should be on the installation guides. So that's why I made the one first on the front loader and now on the top loader. So if you have patience, if you have the tools and some experience, then go for it. Also not clear enough on things like the audio in on the install guide. Kind of have to look at the wiring diagram and figure it out yourself. So again, this is not the easiest mod, but it is a good challenging one, and it really does make this console amazing afterwards. I mean, look at it, it doesn't look modded at all. It's got just the great multi in and out now, and I just love it. So anyway, let me know what you think, and also if you have any questions, please leave them below. If you're new to the channel and you have watched this whole video to this point, please do me a favor and do subscribe. Thank you so much for watching today, and have a wonderful week.